So I'm going to introduce you to anybody who is not familiar. This is Christine Kerr, and she is an oil painter who uses color to express her feelings and associations with significant places where she has lived or spent time. Growing up in different parts of California and camping all of her life have influenced her art greatly. From Los Angeles to San Francisco and Sacramento, she has sketches and ideas for more paintings than she has time to create. So with that introduction, I think maybe if we start by having a conversation about some of your current work and what you're working on right now.
All right. So just within this last year, it's pretty much this sort of theme of things that are significant in my life has been relevant for the last about 5 years. But I've been doing a lot of paintings that have LA themes, and I'm kind of feel like I'm wrapping that up. So last year at Open Studios, I'd started working on Pink's, which is a famous hot dog stand in LA.
Yeah.
And then earlier this spring, I did Hollywood Bowl. And I've also been probably getting more back into the landscapes, places I've camped and hiked with my family. So I did a Lake Tahoe sunset, a Half Dome. Yosemite is one of these places that I could visit a million times. And there's something else. Oh, the one I'm currently working on that's behind me here is coming down from Mount Tam. My family and I had hiked up. I'd been there several times, but since I had kids, I hadn't been there. And in January, my family and I went up there and we hiked it, and it was kind of in the afternoon. So by the time we were coming down, it wasn't dark, but it was starting to get that way. And I've been, of course, I have a background in photography as well. So I'm, take a million pictures and drive my family crazy. And as we were coming down, it was starting to get to be dusk, and you could see the city lights coming on. And my daughter was like, "Mom, that looks like one of your paintings." So we were thinking along.
Oh, that's cool. It's cool that she could spot that.
Yeah.
And is it just because of the palette, the colors that she saw that,
The colors and the lights, I think, it reminded her of the Griffith Observatory painting with all the city lights, coming on. And I guess that sort of excitement of dusk where it's not quite night yet, but there's this exciting transition going on is something that I've tried to capture in a lot of my paintings. So even if they're taken during the middle of the day, I often change the lighting and the colors.
Like the, what's it called? Magic hour?
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So I was going to ask you how you work, if it's from photograph or if it's plein air. And I'm thinking, seeing the LAX painting that you have behind you, it seems like it has to largely be photographic, right?
Yeah. So as much as possible, I work from my own photos, and like the LAX behind me, to be honest, the funny little airplane, I have this little plastic model airplane this UPS guy gave me when I was working at UCLA many years ago. And, I used that to draw from, and I just, made my own composition from different things there. When I can, I work from my own photos. And if I can't, I try to change things. Luckily, I know about perspective. I can change the angle of a building, and I change the colors and stuff to make it my own.
Yeah, they seem like very fantasy driven, like the painting that you have in the background of LAX seems very fantastical. It's not, I mean, if nothing else, even just the fact that I can't think of the architect who made that, the original airport.
Building. I can't remember his name either, but yeah, it's sort of pseudo-futuristic from the 50s and 60s that now is retro looking to us. And it's just really fun. And again, this is a place where I've got fond memories of taking my sister, and when my husband and I lived in LA, and when my husband and I were first dating, he was in Sacramento and came down, and we went to the restaurant in there, which is now closed. But yeah,
it used to be a nightclub for a little bit, because a friend of mine used to DJ there on Saturday nights. This has been like probably 5 years, but yeah, I used to love that building. It's just so neat. I mean, it's just you still get to drive by it when you're leaving the gates, but it's not the same.
No. And
so go ahead.
It's what's fun for me is I paint on these places that have significance in my life, but sharing that and hearing other people's stories, because they are places that so many people recognize, it makes it really fun to hear their stories of what how their connection to it. And so for me, to be totally honest, my art studio at this point is my dining room. So it's a mixed blessing, because in some ways I'm sitting at the dining room table and I eat dinner and it's like, oh, that's not working. Okay, I need to fix that. And it gives me time to think about it. But having my parents over for dinner, I hear their stories. Like, I didn't know that they had gone on dates at the Hollywood Bowl and things like that. So that's a fun part of it for me.
Well, and so that must change your process too, because in a way that means you're just always living with your work.
Yeah.
So there's not, because I was going to ask you about your studio process, but there's not necessarily a place where your art exists and then, you know, a place where you go do other things. Like, you're dining around your work, and you're walking around living with your work, and you're probably having morning coffee with it. So, you know, it probably changes the way that it's probably both good and bad, because sometimes I think that there's a value in getting a break from something, because then you come back and you go, oh, whoa, like, now that I haven't looked at this for a while, there's this thing I didn't notice that I should change. You know, versus if you're around it every day, you may not notice that as much. But then conversely, because you're looking at it so much, you're probably seeing more than you would be if you did have this, you know, other place where you could kind of ignore that it's there.
Well, I'm also a full-time art teacher, so normally I would be away from it during the day, but now that we're teaching online, I'm here
around it all the time.
Looking at it, I'm teaching from another part of the house. But so part of the process also is, because I'm full-time teaching, when I have a break, I often am working more on my sketchbook during the school year. And then when I really get into my painting is when I have a big, I like to paint for, say, 8 hours straight and get in my zone and have my music. And that, you know, doesn't happen as often as I'd like, but then it's kind of nice during the school year to have that little, you know, break to step away from it and reassess it and figure out what's working and what's not.
Well, and that gets to my question about how COVID has affected your practice, because, you know, you're already kind of explaining this. I mean, essentially now you're, you know, a lot of families are experiencing this combination of like their kids being in school and them having their professional work coinciding. And for you, it's not just that, but also your studio time, you know, colliding with your
yes, I don't get that time to myself, whereas there might, not that there were that many days, but where there were days where my kids would have school and I would have a day off. I don't have, like, since last March, I haven't had that really. So it's definitely changed things.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's affecting your ability to, you know, is it affecting the way that you approach your work or your, I know sometimes, you know, I know for me, like, especially with creative projects, if I feel like I'm under a gun of some sort, like a deadline, or I have to get something done before I do something else, it really hampers my ability to just relax into something and focus on it, because I have this thing that's telling me I have other stuff I have to get to. So, you know, what is that like for you right now?
Well, I think it's getting better. Last spring, it was really hard because we thought, oh, this is only going to last for 2 weeks. And it's a very different way for me to teach, where I can't see them in the process and give them tips. I have to see a picture of it and tell them what to go back and fix. And it was just rough, you know, at the end. And I teach high school, so I know these kids pretty well, that it kind of sucked a lot out of me. But once I started painting, like over last spring break, it was like once I got into it, then it helped pull me back out and I was able to do it. So I think it's just, it just feels a little bit different. And at the same time, that's good because I can talk to my students about that when I know they're struggling to get into things. We share a lot about the struggles and working through the struggles and how that is part of the process, and even things that aren't working well. If you can learn from them, it's not a failure. There's still success in there if you grew from whatever, you know. So I try to avoid words like mistakes and, you know, that's horrible or whatever. So it's just different, I guess, more than anything, and just finding time to set aside to really get into it it's just figuring out something new now.
Well, and it's funny, I mean, that kind of aligns with similar concepts to what I talked to Rhonda Egan about a little while ago, because, you know, she was saying how she goes back and sometimes she'll cut off a piece of a painting, or she'll, you know, put it aside because she just decided that it wasn't successful. And so I think, you know, being able to recognize those things and make changes when you need to without getting personal with yourself about it, I think is just
Right.
really part of the process. You know, it's like those are the decisions you have to allow yourself to make, even if it means it's going to take you more time, or you have to let go of something you were really committed to in the work. It's just,
Right.
that's just something that's just part of it, you know?
Responding to what the work needs. So
Yeah, it's just part of the journey of what, you know, making art is, you know? So I'm curious, how, you know, up until this point, have you been doing a lot of exhibitions, or have you been in group shows, or how, you know, how have you been getting your work out into the community, and how has that changed now?
well, probably the main group I've been showing with is Rancho Cordova Arts, has been just wonderful and supportive in offering a lot of different shows, and you know, just building my confidence to show, because here I've been focused on having a family and teaching. And so it's been more recent that I've been starting to show. And then last year I did SAC Open Studios and had such a wonderful experience with it that I knew I wanted to do that again. And, you know, they're just, I'd say again, the time right now is very consumed with trying to be a decent teacher for my students, because they deserve it. It's
Yeah.
a heck of a lot more work and more time. So I know that will even out, and I will, you know, have more time to focus on this, but it's definitely taken away from my painting time just because of the
Yeah,
needs of.
because of what it is. Yeah, totally. But at the same time, I think, you know, your commitment to that, you know, I've been talking to a lot of art teachers, art instructors, professors I know right now that are all struggling with the same thing. Like, how do you communicate these platforms through this new way of doing things? You know, you can't be there with them, you can't show them a technique. It's just, it's not the same. And I think that to the places where continuity is possible, conversely, it is making a huge impact for the people that, you know, the students and the people who still need that other thing, you know, like a non-linear way of thinking about things or having a conversation. You know, art facilitates these things that you can't do in other ways. And so
it's it's been really positive in seeing that they have a creative outlet for things they can't articulate.
yep.
And last spring I saw a lot of it with my students, and their parents seeing their work were like, whoa, okay, this is very telling. But yet they had a positive way of expressing how they were feeling. So I think it's as frustrating as it can be, we're figuring things out, and it's just super important that we continue to do it so that they can learn and grow and just have that positive outlet for themselves.
Well, and actually, gosh, I am realizing we're getting close to running out of time. If people are watching this and they want more information about your work, or they want to find out how to acquire something, how would they do that?
Probably the best thing would be to go to my website. It's christinekerrart.com. And my email is christinekerrart.com, and they can email me. So I do have an online store, and I also have an Etsy account with prints of my work. And if they want originals, then they should email me and ask me, you know, for availability, and we'll figure it out. At this point, I don't really want to ship large paintings anywhere, but if they're local, I'm sure I could figure out a decent place and time to meet them and make that happen.
Great. Yeah, I'm so glad we got to talk, and I think what you're doing is really important, and I think that, you know, your carefulness with wanting to stay in touch with your students and everything is so great. And so I think I want to congratulate you on all of that. And I'm glad that you participated in our conversations today so we can keep the continuity of these programs going. So
thanks for doing this. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Christine. And yeah, keep on keeping on.
All right. You too. Thanks.
Yeah.